Welcome to Brookline Hub In-Depth. I'm your host, Harvey Bravman. I'm really excited to have Joyce Graff on the show. A lot of you may know Joyce from all of her contributions to the Brookline Rotary. Joyce is also the author of several books, and in 1993 founded the VHL Alliance. Joyce is on the show today to talk about powerful patients. Welcome, Joyce. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Thank you, Harvey. It's always nice to be with you as well. In 1993, actually in 1986, my son was diagnosed with a rare condition that his father had. And so it's a hereditary, genetically caused condition. And it's called von Hippel-Lindau disease. It's named for two European doctors who first described it over 100 years ago. So it's been around, it's been recognized, but it was considered extremely rare. And even in 1986, very few doctors even heard of it or maybe remembered one paragraph from medical school. But finding someone who actually understood how to deal with it was extremely difficult. And because I had been through 15 years of it with my husband, I had some clues that I was able to work with, but they were only clues and I really needed some expertise. So I met with some other patients, and I remember the first conversation I had with a woman by the name of Susan Warnick, who lives in Maryland. And she and I met for the first time in a coffee shop and talked about our experiences with our two husbands who both had died of VHL. And at the end of the hour, we sat back and we said, this conversation has been totally amazing. I've learned more in the last 1 hour than I've learned in the last year. So what if we could get all the patients together and put all our experiences and our conjectures in one pile? Maybe we could help the doctors fix this. So we decided to do exactly that. We began gathering patients from wherever we could find them. And it was not easy because, with the privacy laws, it actually mitigates against putting patients together. And again, this was in 1992, 93, before the internet. I know it's hard for many people to conceive of a world without the internet, but there actually was one. And so it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of faxes, a lot of paper mail. We approached the doctors who were most likely to recognize VHL and asked them to let their patients know that we were there. And so that was the birth of the VHL Alliance in 1993. It was an amazing journey because I had been 15 years with my husband with this disease and never met another person outside our family who had this disease. And when you're in that position, it's so lonely. It's just, you feel like nobody can possibly understand. My husband used to say, I feel like some strange bird that's descended from Mars and nobody can possibly relate to my experience. And so finding fellow travelers was just opened amazing doors for me and helped a lot. And my ability to listen to people's stories and share and their experiences was healing both for them and for me. So giving back was an important part of my own healing from dealing with this kind of disease. So I know that you and I've talked about other people that we know who have gone through rare disease experiences. And one of the most important things is to find other folks who actually understand what you're going through. And there are, thanks to the internet, there are much easier ways now to do that. One of my collaborators is with smartpatients.com. There's Patients Like Me. There are other discussion groups of people with similar conditions, and just finding other folks. It doesn't mean they're not doctors. You're not going to get expertise, but you're going to get clues. And clues are so important. Finding other people who've had a similar experience and what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. All of that is very important.
Thank you for that explanation, Joyce. My wife is hereditary angioedema, and not only has her lifelong friendships that she's, been a part of from all over the country for other patients that have that condition. One thing I noticed from being in various emergency rooms around the world with her is that many times she knows, especially if it's a condition that you have to go to the emergency room in certain situations, where she understands more about her condition than the people who are treating her. And in her situation, for some reason, there is something called hereditary angioedema and there is angioedema, and they are two separate conditions. And so we've had strong discussions with emergency room doctors who are told her that she has one condition when she has another condition that sounds like it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. But and its treatment is totally different. So I definitely understand that. Tell me a little about your son and your husband, and I know your husband passed from VHL, and how's your son doing? And
yeah, thank you. I mean, VHL is a genetic issue, and it means that you're more likely to get certain kinds of tumors. And these tumors do sometimes occur in the general population. It's not that they're different tumors. It's just that you're more likely to have more of them and more frequently and in all these multiple organ systems. So VHL can affect the eye, brain, spinal cord, kidney, pancreas, adrenal glands, and the inner ear, by the way. So my son has had all but one of those. And so dealing with these multiple tumors in multiple organ systems repeatedly over the course of your lifetime is obviously a very difficult thing to do. When my husband and I were going through it, it felt like tumors rained out of the sky. There was no way to tell when they were coming. There was nothing, no doctors could explain to us what was going on. But at least now we have these clues. We do understand the basic underlying mechanism of what this genetic flaw is doing. And in fact, it has proven to be one of the keys to understanding cancers of all types. So it's very interesting now, doctors who may not know the condition frequently have heard about the VHL gene, because the VHL gene has become a very important component in research for cancer. So my son had kidney cancer tumors when he was 14 and 15. And at the time they said, oh, the only cure for kidney cancer is to take out the kidneys. So they wanted to take out both the kidneys of my 14-year-old boy. And I said, whoa, I don't think so. and they said, oh, this is cancer. This could kill him. You're gambling with your son's life. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, my husband had the same disease. They didn't even look at his kidneys until he was 32. And yeah, he had tumors on both kidneys at that point, but no metastasis. So why are we talking about such a radical treatment for a 14-year-old boy? Can't we at least let him get through puberty? I mean, come on. And the doctors were pushing back at me. And, this is Boston, and the doctors know better. They all sit at the right hand of God, So it was not easy. But I live in Boston, so I took myself to the Harvard Medical School library, and I started reading up on VHL. And my husband had died 9 years before that, so I'd been out of it for quite a while. And I said, hopefully they've learned more. And I turned up an article about 16 people with VHL in the kidney. And it was about a 10-year-old article. And I said, good, I want to talk to these people and see how they're doing. So I called the first author, and he was retired. And so I called the second author, who was at the University of Kansas. And she said to me, take out his kidneys? We almost never take out kidneys. So I'm going, oh, thank you. Thank you. I needed that. So after a long discussion, she said to me, now, I have to warn you that if you go to a doctor in Boston and you say, the University of Kansas recommends, you will not have a lot of credibility. So I had to learn strategies for negotiating with doctors who knew better. Just as you described, sometimes the patients come in knowing more about the condition sometimes than the doctors do. We need their expertise, we need their experience, and they need to respect the fact that we are with our bodies 24 hours a day, and we do have a perspective that is valuable. And putting those two together is the way you solve things. Neither one of us has all the answers. And that's an important lesson for patients to learn, but it's also an extremely important lesson for doctors to learn.
It's amazing to me that you're the doctor that prescribed removing your son's kidneys thought that it was a terrible risk not to remove the kidneys, but didn't think that it was a terrible risk to remove the kidneys.
Yes.
And that if your son didn't have you, and maybe if he didn't have, if his father didn't have the same condition, so you and your husband hadn't been through so much before, would have just done what this doctor, who's the right hand of God, had recommended or had prescribed for the situation, and who knows what would have happened.
I think today there's a lot more recognition of quality of life. And that's a very important factor that too often got ignored in the past, that the doctors would look and say, technically, what is the best way to do it? I'll give you another example. We would go to eye doctors and the doctor would say, I can save your eye, we'll do this. What we learned was, yes, but can you save my vision? Because from the doctor's perspective, saving that eyeball and keeping it in your head looking reasonably good was his goal. But your goal is to save the vision, and that's two different goals. So we had to learn those distinctions and negotiate with our doctors from, yes, but my quality of life, what's that going to be like? It's not all about fixing the tumor. It's about, how is my life going to work after this? Can I take care of my children? Can I go to work? What's my pain level going to be? Those are key questions for the patient.
And the doctors are under a lot of stress. I go to a neurologist for a condition that I have called CIDP, and just when you're in the waiting room and that waiting room is packed full of people, and you feel the pressure when you're in front of the doctor of, I make copious notes so that I make sure that I get all my questions in, because I know there's so many people waiting, and the doctor is under stress to get through to everyone, and every condition is different, but it's easier if you treat them like they were all the same. And it sounds stressful. It also sounds like it's not just about powerful patients that we'll talk about, but also powerful caretakers too, right? I mean,
yes, it takes all of the above, and you said some very smart things in there. And I always recommend to people, make a list, write it down, because when you get into that doctor's office, all those things you've been thinking about are going to fly right out of your head. And so the time to write it down is before the previous day. You sit there and you make a list and or share it with your partner. We always recommend that people take somebody with you to a stressful doctor's appointment or take a tape recorder, one of the two. And with our phones now, we all have the ability to record on our phones. So don't be shy to say to the doctor, do you mind if I record this? Because I'm going to forget half of what you say. Make it on you, by the way. Don't make it, I'm documenting this because I might decide to sue you. Please don't make it sound like that, because that will shut the doctor up totally. But if you say, please let me record this because I'm going to forget it. I'm under so much stress. And almost all doctors will readily agree to that, because they know that the stress syndrome, we all do it. We're going to forget things. And the other thing is that sometimes when they deliver not so great news, our brains go into a sort of self-protective mode. It says, okay, buddy, you've had enough. I'm shutting down for today. And so my husband would sit there and nod, in all the right places when the doctor was talking. And afterward, he'd say to me, I wish he had talked about X. And I take out my notes and I go, well, actually, he did talk about it. And so it would be in my notes. But you need a person there or a tape recorder there to help you recall all the good things that the doctor did say.
Tell us a little about Powerful Patients.
Yeah, so since 1993, I'd been working with people with VHL. I've talked with literally thousands of people all over the world with this rare condition. And we began to realize that because of the strategies we had learned for negotiating with doctors and finding better information, these are strategies that apply to any condition. And so people would sometimes come to me and say, well, my next door neighbor was diagnosed with blah, blah, blah disease. And I was actually able to help him find the right help, even though I haven't the foggiest notion what this is, And so it was that perception that led me to, when I stepped away from the VHL Alliance, not totally, of course, still like 30% of me is invested in VHL, but the rest of it said, we can share this with the world. And anybody who's struggling, trying to find help, trying to find a diagnosis, just understanding what's going on or finding another fellow traveler, these are very important steps to take. And if we can help anybody do that, that's fantastic. So from my experience coming out of VHL, from my friend Mike's experience as a 20+ year survivor of kidney cancer, from Robin Martinez is the lead moderator for smartpatients.com, and she helps people with conversations about blah, blah, blah disease, anything you want to talk about, there's a group there talking about it. And just getting into those conversations and hearing the struggles and hearing the little bits of progress they've made in different places, that's magic. It's simply magic. So I've been doing Powerful Patient with Mike and Robin since about 2012. And we love doing this work. We're all volunteers, and we just try to help people think things through, listen to their own instincts, because frequently you know more than you think you know, and hooking you up with some other people on the same journey so that two brains are better than one. You put them together and you might find a little avenue that you hadn't thought of.
It must be so important to have a caretaker with you that can, because I know that it's so easy to sort of feel like a victim a little bit and to just be so vulnerable. And I found that my wife, who has hereditary angioedema, she's a powerhouse. She's learned to be a self-advocate. I'm still learning from having a condition for a relatively short period of time to, I'm ready to find out everything I need to find out, and I'm ready to push back. But when you do go into the doctor's office, as you mentioned, it's so easy to sort of feel like a victim, even though obviously the doctor's not there to victimize you, right? But
Oh,
but you still feel the second you get in the doctor's office, you just want to run away and not want to deal with it because you're afraid of what you might hear. You're afraid what might happen if you push it,
right.
the vulnerability that you feel. And
Yes, and one of the things that I began learning early is that the words you use, the thoughts that you have, begin to color the universe. They put themselves out into the real world and they begin to feel real. So if you feel like a victim, you're going to start acting like a victim. So I did some of those, what they used to call transformational statements. I'm not a victim, I'm a warrior, I'm a survivor, I'm a, whatever. Make it, spin it positive. And when I first joined up with a group in England, they were all characterizing themselves as sufferers, and their spouse was the caregiver, the carer, they say in England. And that immediately puts you into that sufferer victim position. And I worked really hard to get them to stop using that word. We are survivors. We are empowered to work with our doctors to make progress. So we don't know more than our doctors. The doctors know more in many realms than we do, but we need them and they need us in order to make progress. So we've got to empower ourselves to really feel the power within us, to respect the knowledge that we do have. Even when you feel like you don't know anything, you actually do know something. You know how it feels. You know what time of day it's worse. You know what you eat sometimes makes it worse or better. What activities make it worse or better. All of that is important data. And if you write that down and share that with your doctor, or just share it with yourself, just track your pain level during different times of day and different activities and different things you eat. Do that for a couple of weeks and then look back at those notes and see if you begin to see patterns. It's those patterns that are critically important. And the doctor is not going to hear those in a 12-minute conversation. They're
right.
not going to get that. If you take that data to your doctor and say, okay, I've been tracking it for the last 2 weeks. This is what I'm beginning to see. What do you see in these notes? And most doctors will be thrilled to have that much information to work with.
That's important bit of advice. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Any subjects that you'd like to get into? With that, I know you have an incredible story about the woman from Greece.
Oh, yeah. I think one of the things I love to do is to, empower is my key word, to help people do it themselves. And it's much more powerful and long lasting when people do it themselves. What I can do for them is minor in comparison. The story you're referring to is a woman whose name is Athena. She lives in Greece. She and her daughter both have VHL. And she came to me, must be 15 years ago now, of saying, what can we do? There's no help for VHL in Greece. Well, I had already written a book about managing your health with VHL that I was trying to empower the patients and to share that with their GPs so that they could learn how to find VHL issues and how to deal with them constructively. And so that was already in English. She worked with a doctor to get it translated into Greek. And it was the first information for general practitioners and physicians and patients in Greece that they could touch in their native language. Because until you're in the native language, you're not talking to the GPs.
Right.
You may be talking to the high-powered doctors who go to the international meetings who can read English, but you're not talking to the GPs, and that's where the rubber hits the road. So we're trying to help the patients understand and the GPs and get them to the specialists when they need a specialist, and how to tell when you need a specialist. All that's critically important. So now she has negotiated with the government to add testing for VHL to the genetic testing that they do. And she's been able to bring experts from around the world into Greece to do seminars for doctors. It's been just totally amazing. She's done a wonderful job.
That's great. I would think that the part of the conversation when you were talking about patients, the strength that they can get from each other, communicating and exchanging information that help them in their medical recovery, I think probably right also will help with just navigating life. I remember when I first got my CIDP, I couldn't do things like pull a credit card out of my wallet, or I'm an Apple fanatic, so I could not open. It's difficult for most adults to open the plastic bags to put the apples in anyway, but I could not do it because it was hard for me just to hold something that light in my hand without dropping it. And I remember when you ask people to do it, some people are beautiful and they just help you, and then ask if there's anything else that they can help you with. And then there are other people that will maybe do it and it's don't even look at you when they hand it to you, or they tell you that all you need to do is have a little patience and maybe lecture you on that, if you just take the time and have a little patience yourself, you don't have to ask other people. And you want to tell them that you have a neurological condition, but you don't, because you're thinking of them. You're thinking, well, if they find out the truth about this, they're going to feel awful about themselves, even though you don't know them. So you just say, yeah, sure, I should have, whatever. And but I think just gathering strengths from each other must be so important. And
Yeah, it certainly is.
alone.
Yeah, and I teach quilting at the senior center, and several people will say to me, oh, I've given up sewing because I can't thread a needle, or I can't grip the scissors, or whatever. There's adaptive equipment. You could carry some sort of little scissors in your pocket if you wanted to. But the other thing is you can make a joke about it. I have this joke. I have asked so many different people to just open a bottle of soda for me because I can't grip the thing. So I just say, could I ask you to open this for me? I'm an old lady and I'm losing my grip, so and so they'll laugh about it and just open it for me. So if you joke about it, that usually lightens the atmosphere and prevents the lecture from ensuing.
I used to have to wear adaptive clothing, and I had to go around and show I had made a film slow witness, and I had to show it in different places outside of the state and get in planes and stuff like that. And I wore clothes that you could see the buttons on my shirt, but there were
Velcro underneath.
No, there was actually magnets.
That's
To the
clever.
magnet, and it would make my shirt. It was the best shirt I had because it was so fitting, because of the magnets and everything. And it only took like a half a second. And I would be explaining to audiences while I would have two hands to hold the microphone and explain why. And then I would explain the shirt. And I swear half the audience wanted to have one of those shirts.
It makes me think of Superman doing a quick change.
Right. It was great.
That's great.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And is there anything one last question, is there anything that people can do to help you in your cause? And or anything?
Yes, thank you. I mean, there's a certain, we could try to keep everything running very inexpensively, but it's always great to have a little extra money around to help bring people when there's no surgery available in a foreign country, for example. Sometimes we have to help people get themselves to an expert in a different country. And that does mean that there is some expense. So we recently did that with a patient from Algeria. So donations are always gratefully accepted. We do interviews on different conditions, most recently on postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. When you get up too fast and you feel like you're going to faint, that's actually a syndrome, and there is help for that. So if you would be gracious enough to go to powerfulpatient.org and give us a little donation to encourage us along, that would be very great. But we work as volunteers, and we work to help people help themselves. That's our goal. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Joyce. And for all of you at home, the next thing that you're going to see is that website so that you can help powerful patients. Thank you for being on.
Thanks,
That was
Harvey.
great.
Hi, my name is Danielle Myers of ADW Video Productions and BrooklineHub.com. BrooklineHub.com is a 501c3 nonprofit online publication dedicated to community building through local reporting and events. Brookline Facing Civil Rights was produced by our founder, Harvey Bravman. The film is about the experiences of African Americans who helped break the wall of segregation that existed in Brookline before the civil rights laws were passed in the 1960s. Last year, the film sold out the Coolidge Corner Theater and included a panel discussion on inclusivity. You can stream the film and the discussion on BrooklineHub.com in exchange for a donation to the Brookline Community Foundation's Safety Net Fund. You can also stream Soul Witness, a film that features interviews with Brookline Holocaust survivors conducted 30 years ago, on soulwitness.org. For the last 11 years, Harvey has been interviewing outstanding teens as part of an event held at the Coolidge called the Brookline Youth Awards. The Brookline Youth Awards are an opportunity for Brookline residents to hear about the character, challenges, and dreams of its young people, as well as adults dedicated to their success through the power and intimacy of video interviews.